Ladies and gentlemen, our afternoon section will start now. May I invite all of you to come inside the ballroom and settle into your seat. Please switch your mobile phone to silent mode so our program can run smoothly. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed your lunch. And we will now start our first afternoon section titled Domain Names and Emerging Technologies. This session will discuss why domain names and digital access are still essential towards building a strong online presence. Also, emerging technologies such as mobile application, artificial intelligence, replace the role of domain names. And let's welcome our section moderator, Mr. Arben Kwan, Head of Corporate Development and Strategic Alliance APAC from CSC to lead this conversation with our speakers. And can I also invite the panelists for this section to join him on stage, please? Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Just to be sure, do we have mic on the stage?
Oh, yes. Please, the technical department, please bring the microphone on stage for our panelists.
Whatever.
Yeah, and you can settle into your seat.
Hello. Oh, there we go. So before I begin, I would like to introduce my panelists. But before I actually do that, I would like to actually introduce the session to you guys as well. So as you know, I come from CSC, which is a corporate registrar. We deal with a lot of the larger corporation and how they manage domain names. Sometimes we are thinking about how we can actually contribute a bit better in the ICANN conversation. We are certainly not the type of registrar that drive a lot of domain registration. Maybe we do a bit better in new GTLD, but it only happens once in 14 years, apparently. So, but one thing that we think we can contribute a bit better with is actually on, the value of domain names. So this is actually one of the sessions that we want to discuss how we can actually understand better what's the value of domain names, and hopefully by the end of the day of the session, you're actually able to appreciate domain name and understand appreciate the value of domain names a bit better as well. So, so we are actually going to have a rather complicated discussion. Even when I prepare the question, I think it's quite complicated as well. So I would like to spend just 2 minutes to introduce the session and then the panelists and how we're going to carry out the discussion. So when we think about the value of domain names, what does that actually mean? So value certainly is a perception. And it might impact how you are selling, as if you're a registry or registrar, how much you can actually sell domain names and people still buying it. It might relate to cybersecurity issues, how people actually use domain name in a meaningful way and stuff like that. So before I begin, I'd like to have a quick roll call and see, anyone. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I would like you to put your hands up. So the first question is whether you actually think throughout the last 10 years, whether the value of domain name increase or decrease. So if you think the value of domain name actually increase or improve, please put your hand up. Nice. Great, thank you. So anyone actually think the value of domain name decrease? All right, a few hands as well. I'm quite tempted to actually ask you why you actually think that, but I'll leave that to the panelists, and you can certainly come up with a question. So the reason why I'm asking this is because of the discussion that we're going to have, and if you look into the whole track, track A, this is kind of how I interpret it as the focus as well. The session following up of this, moderated by Jennifer, we'll also talk about similar things, and we're going to conclude with new GTLD as a plenary as well. So let me just introduce my panelists, and we are going to talk about this issue about value in different perspective. I'll start with the panelists in my on the stage. We have Owen, head of ICANN compliance and policy and relation guy, according to his LinkedIn profile, in Namecheap, and also the executive committee chair of RSG. So Namecheap is certainly one of the largest registrar globally and a pioneer in the adoption of some of the latest technology. So hopefully he can share the perspective of this, and especially related to emerging technology from a registrar perspective. We also have Manju on the stage as well. She's the counselor in JNSO Council, representing the non-commercial stakeholder group. So she said that it's quite strange for her to be on the stage because, why she over there? But, end user perspective is actually quite important because we're talking about the value of domain names and how important domain name is. At the end of the day, we are selling domain names to the end user. So hopefully Manju can share her perspective as well. And online, we have Elena, VP of Government and NGO Engagement of ICANN. So Elena has been working in the European Commission on internet governance and part of a important role in ICANN. So hopefully Elena can help share some perspective from a policy compliance perspective. And we also have Ram Mohan, Chief Strategy Officer at Identity Digital. I looked through Ram's profile this morning and I find that he has a lot of roles and I cannot have time to list them out. But I think he doesn't need too much of an introduction as well. So in particular, in this particular session, Ram will represent the ASAC perspective from a technical and security perspective and give his comment as well. So thank you very much, everyone and all the panelists to participate in this particular discussion today. So this is what we are going to do. So we have listed 3 particular emerging technology, and we want to talk about how it impacts domain names value and perception today. And we have mobile apps, blockchain, and AI. I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the technology part, and the later part of the session, we're going to talk about the business opportunity presented with this emerging technology and domain names. So that's basically how we're going to go about in the session. So actually, let me get my computer because I'm supposed to look into the comments as well. Now, so let me start with a question, and I'm going to have an open question to all the panelists. So when we work with some large enterprise, we see that some of them actually tell me most of their revenue are currently driven by mobile apps now. So they don't see how domain names is relevant anymore. So I want to see, do you, for example, Owen, you're a registrar, and maybe Ram can address this as well. Do you see domain name registration actually dropped because of the proliferation of e-commerce changing into mobile apps?
Hi, this is Owen Smigelski. I don't really think so, because while apps can certainly work for very large companies, I think it's a lot more difficult for small and medium businesses or people who want to get online and do their own thing. And so that really they need to have that ability to get their own online presence. And if you're required to go, say, through an app or something like that, it can be rather restrictive, or you may have to share revenue, or you may be constrained by certain rules there. So I think there's always going to be a component there where people can do stuff outside of it. It's just not exclusive to having to be in that app. And also, not everybody's using a device that can have apps. So, there's still going to be use of computers and web browsers and things like that. So I think there's still a pretty good, strong future for domain names and use of domain names.
All right. Well, how about Ram?
From my perspective, Alvin, what we're seeing is domain name registrations remain strong while app growth is also very strong. As you said, mobile apps have become a dominant revenue channel for many companies. But the data shows that there is continued growth in domain registrations, in the branded TLDs, region-specific domains, and niche verticals, right? Look, at the end of the day, apps and domain names serve complementary, not competing roles. Mobile apps are excellent for user retention and engagement, but discovery, branding, and accessibility still starts on the web. And so far, what we're seeing is that domains offer global discoverability, searchability, and cross-platform reach, and apps alone cannot match that.
Interesting. So basically, you're talking about mobile apps and domain name offer kind of different usage scenario, so they're complementary, not in conflict. So let me just ask this: so if there's like a small company that come to you and say that it seems that most of the country that I'm working in especially in Southeast Asia, a lot of these people are moving directly into Facebook or a online platforms instead of using domain names. What would be your argument to them to say that, hey, domain name is actually still important? How do you clearly delineate the two?
Let me take a go at this, Owen. Perhaps we can work together on this, because we encounter this on a regular basis, and it's not a hard argument to make. Partly because if you look today, even the most app-centric businesses still heavily invest in their web presence, and they have strong domain name presence. Some of it for defensive purposes, but quite a bit of it for the discoverability and the searchability in the App Store, searchability, in search engines, and now searchability in GPT engines. Those things, GPT does not endear itself as much to app-based systems as it does for web-based or domain-based systems, because it can ingest a whole lot more data. So it's not like we have to say you have to pick one or the other. The reality is that you end up picking one and the other.
All right. Owen, any comment from you?
No, I just kind of funny here. I think Ram is looking at the notes on my computer screen, because it seems we both had something like complementary, not contradictory in here, and I do agree with that. I think that it's just not Yes, I understand there can be, if you've got one device that you're using, that's the only thing, that perhaps you may be more likely to use an app or something along those lines. But as Ram said, discoverability, I don't think most people only use a single device. I am aware of some people who may use an employer-provided device. There may be restrictions on using an app because every app needs to be reviewed from a security perspective, whereas you could access it through the web with no problem. So I still think even as we see a proliferation of apps, there will still be people who use both as well.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think what Ram also mentioned about search is quite important. It's not something that's especially SME understand. If you are like, I read a report before that if you are using a mobile app, people tends to use that particular mobile app for a long time. But if you are recruiting new customers, people don't search on App Store to find your business. That's not the user habit. They still Google, they still do Baidu search or something like that. So if you are to recruit new customer, search is very important, and search is linked directly to domain names instead of App Store. So any comments on the end user perspective, I wonder?
Oh, yes. Actually, I just realized why I'm here, because I think it has been very business and industry kind of talk. And I feel like from an end user's perspective, I mean, just to clarify first though, so because I represent the NCSG non-commercial stakeholder group, we mostly actually in ICANN, we represent the voice of the domain registrants instead of end users. There's another huge community group at large that represents the end users. But as at large always says, we are all end users of the internet. So I guess I can still at some point I'm still an end user. And I remember Owen when he started, he was saying that most small or small business or tiny business still need domain names. But as end users who like to buy stuff, actually my experience for small or like tiny personal individual, one-man business is quite different, especially in Taiwan, or I guess, as you say, Southeast Asia, because Taiwan is part of Southeast Asia. I love bread. And in Taiwan, it's not as common as in, Europe or, the Western world. Most of the bakers I know, they have Instagram accounts, and they open their Google form, bi-weekly to gather orders for the breads. And then you have to line them, which is a messaging app that's popular in Taiwan, to inform them you have the bank transfer of the money of your bread. So none of this actually uses a domain name. It's Instagram, and then it's Google form, and then it's a messaging app. So I guess probably this speaks to a different experience of, for a lot of people, when I talk to my layman friends, they're like, who uses website now? Everything's happening online or Instagram. But I totally agree with, what Owen and Ron was saying. I personally, I'm a stubborn kind of refuser of apps. Whenever you go to a shopping website, if it's on your mobile, they always have this prompt, like always and forever, prompting you to go to our app, download our app, we'll give you coupons. And I always say, no, I'm gonna stay on this because I don't want to download another app to any of my mobile devices. So the app fatigue is definitely real. And from that perspective, and also because I'm in this community, I know more about domain names. I definitely think I agree with how you guys are saying domain names and apps are complementary and not contradictory. Thank you.
I think what you bring out is a very interesting concept or misconception in some way as well, because I think a lot of the time, end user would perceive domain name is directly linked to websites. So I think that begs the question, is domain name related to website? And I think that's a really good pivot if I ask for Elena perspective, because in recent years, a lot of the government actually come up with critical infrastructure regulation and needs to talk about domain name significantly as well. So now it's not all critical infrastructure regulation specifically mention domain name and DNS, but some does. And I think that's actually help us understand the value of domain name in a sense as well. So Elena, maybe you can share your perspective. Why are these government listing domain name as part of the critical infrastructure? What would that impact, and how would that impact how we should see domain names?
Yes, thank you, Albert, for the question. Hello, everyone. Let me reintroduce myself, if I may, although Albert made the introduction at the beginning. I'm part of the government engagement team of ICANN, and I follow the policy-making world. Therefore, my contribution to this discussion is from this perspective, and I obviously leave the commercial part and the business part to my fellow panelists who are excellent, and I'm learning already a lot. So from the policy-making world, as you said very rightly so, Albert, not everywhere in the world we have cybersecurity regulation mostly that is specifically singling out the domain name system and domain names, but we do have it in Europe, and we also partly have it in North America. In Europe, the NIS2 directive, which we have in this community at least extensively talked about, and when we talk about NIS2 directive, usually we refer to the domain name registration data provisions, which is one single article in the whole directive. But most importantly, and even it goes to our discussion now, the NIS2 directive is a directive about essential and important entities. And there you have the domain name operators, the domain name system operators, and the registries, not registrars as such, captured as essential entities, which, to your point, speaks precisely to the importance that policymakers attribute to the domain name system and domain names. In fact, this directive had been there for a long time. It was updated recently, just to show you the importance that policymakers seem to attribute to this bit is DNS was there before, but was lighter. With the updated version, what happened is that every DNS operator and registry automatically are named essential. Whereas before, it was up to each country to have an evaluation and say, are they essential? Are they not essential? We will determine. Now it's automatically essential. And not only that, there is an exception for micro and small enterprises. You are exempt from the cybersecurity measures that this directive imposes if you are a small and micro enterprise. But if you're a DNS small and micro enterprise, you're not exempt. Again, speaks to the importance that policymakers attribute to this bit, to the domain name system and domain names. In North America, I should also mention, of course, that we have the exemption from the root server operators in recognition of the multi-stakeholder approach, obviously. We have a similar legislation in North America, the Cyber Incident Reporting of Critical Infrastructure Act, CIRCIA, but again, speaks to critical infrastructure, and then we have a domain name system, and again, an exception for the multi-stakeholder governed organizations. It's not only the cybersecurity legislation that I just mentioned, further to those, and again, looking at the European region as an example, we very recently had a suggestion, a proposal for a blueprint for cybersecurity incidents that was speaking about the DNS specifically and the need for a failover plan in case something happens. I have to tell you, this was just part of the proposal. It's not there anymore because the countries in Europe thought in a text that is speaking about exchange of information and cybersecurity exercises, why are we singling out the DNS as such? So it's not there. But again, it's an example that speaks to the importance that policymakers attribute to the DNS. Now, to go back to your question, what does that show us, except from the importance? I would say that the legislation that is put in place is not something crazy in the sense that everyone that is there in the domain name system operation, and they take themselves seriously, and that's all of us, they do have cybersecurity measures in place. But it speaks to the fact that policymakers pay closer and closer attention to the domain name system. They do seem to continue believing that it is an essential part of the infrastructure, even including technological evolutions that are coming through. And speaking to the last part, technological shifts that we see coming through, I will refer to another example from the policymaker world. I'm sorry, it again comes from the European region, but a lot seems to be happening there. We saw that recently there was a reflection on new technologies and possible changes that those will bring, including on the network layer of the internet. And that was a reflection that culminated in a conference on Web4 and virtual worlds that happened early April in Brussels. Our CEO participated there, made relevant points again about the continuing importance of the domain name system and complementarity with everything else. But I'm just telling you that from the policymakers' world, they're mindful of technological shifts. There seems to have been some discussion, some wondering there of whether and how existing multi-stakeholder technical organizations and policymaking on domain name systems, such as ourselves, should be involved in potential new forms of governance that would be necessitated by the approximation, overlap, and synergies between domain names and new technologies that the panel is going to be discussing today. I hope that was useful for the discussion, and I hope that addressed your question, Albert. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. But I think because of time, I would like to move on to blockchain as a technology and a risk and a relationship with domain name. But I would like to come back from time to time about this idea about domain name as part of the critical infrastructure, because I think when we look into new technologies, there will be a lot of different new technologies. But what it shouldn't change is how it's the role of domain name as a central part of the internet, and this idea of domain being a critical infrastructure of the internet itself should be a value that we need to understand a bit more as an industry. So I'll revisit this particular concept a little bit later on. So let me move on to blockchain. But before I do that, actually, so blockchain domain name, normally we call it Web3. But Elena, you mentioned the word Web4 as part of your speech. Do you mind explaining what Web4 is?
Excellent question, Albert. I don't know what Web4 is. And
okay.
to a lot of people trying to understand, there seems to be different understanding on what Web4 is. I asked GPT as well, But if you will, in the context of the discussions that took place in the conference that I just mentioned before, which was a European region conference that spoke to Web4, they had a definition of their own. And and again, that's their definition, they there included everything that we're talking about today, blockchain, AI, and other things. But if you ask me, I do not think that I have the answer. And honestly, I had not come across someone that is giving me a definite answer. But Ram here will have something to say over it. Thank you.
All right. Well, so let's pull back a little bit and being less futuristic. So blockchain used to be a favorite topic a couple of years ago, before AI happened, and then the conversation kind of pivot into AI. But I think, next year when we have the new GTLD launching, blockchain may come back as a big talking point as well. So what I think different from mobile app, blockchain doesn't kind of seek to replace domain name from a usage perspective, but it may change some of the technical function of domain DNS through a blockchain technology itself. So I believe blockchain might be suitable for some aspect and not suitable for other aspects. So I want to ask how the panelists actually understand this. So let me start with this. So do you think blockchain is a suitable technology to run a global unique identifier system?
Yeah, I think this is actually already happening. And so I think people who may not know, Namecheap, we purchased a Handshake, which is one of the Web3 operators out there. And so, I think it allows for better innovation, speed, development. There's a much lower startup cost with people who want to get involved and start operating within that zone. But there can be some limitations because it's not as interoperable or available as something, say, through ICANN's route. But for those who may have been here for the Contracted Party Summit, which was the past 2 days, there was a number of Web3 participants who were there who were actively engaging with ICANN, who may be considering doing their new GTLDs in the next round. And so I think there really is that interoperability and an ability where Web3 can learn from Web2 and vice versa. And I don't think it's necessarily something that's fully exclusive. At least Namecheap, we have a product called Thunderbolt, which is it's an app that you can communicate through domain names, where that's your address as opposed to having a telephone number or something like that. But you can have a traditional GTLD or a CCTLD or a Handshake domain or an Ethereum domain. So it's just a different way of connecting a whole bunch of different people. And that's all kind of built on top of those various structures.
All right. Thank you. Ram?
Alvin, it used to be that the answer was 42, the ultimate, answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything. But there's been an attempt for blockchain identifiers to actually take over that role. I've heard blockchain identifiers, be represented as being able to do everything and then more. But look, I think there is something for us to consider. Emerging technologies are actually shaping kind of the next generation of where value is found. I think social media platforms actually end up limiting some level of choice and control when enterprises, SMEs, you were saying, they go straight to a social media platform. It's very convenient until the social media platform decides to go a certain path, and suddenly all the investment you've made ends up being in trouble. We experienced that with a whole bunch of businesses that had made their choice to be on Twitter, now X. And then when significant changes happened, they suddenly found that a bunch of their user base just went away because they were depending on the platform. So decentralization is often presented as one of the biggest reasons, what you can do with blockchain. And I agree, it has tremendous benefits. Two things to keep in mind: decentralization doesn't require blockchain. It can start with a domain name, but I think there are tremendous business opportunities because of the innovation that's happening. Because the blockchain piece reimagines the infrastructure that is actually behind, the identifier technologies, right? That's what in my opinion, that's what it really is bringing forward from an innovation point of view. So when you look at token-based memberships or on-chain user verification or NFT or authentication of identity, those are underlying infrastructure pieces that blockchain is innovating on. Now, domain names and websites and all of those things still exist, and right now what we're seeing is a lot of bridging technologies that allow for the traditional Web2 technologies to be able to interact with the innovations that the Web3 technologies are bringing. So it could be that blockchain will be what is going to kill all domain names. That's entirely possible. But at least the way it's going right now, it seems like there is more of a focus of integrating the features and functionalities that blockchain identifiers bring to traditional domain names.
Thank you. I think this is very interesting. I think we should really talk about when the integration happened, would that bring new business opportunity? But I would like to hold that question. So, Mandrew, I want to ask you one question. So, some actually argues that what technology should be used is entirely up to the society, and ICANN should have no say at all. What do you think?
So I think first we have to clarify what ICANN, like, what do you mean by ICANN here? Because unlike, I guess, a lot of people in ICANN who has been there before ICANN is born, my generation, we learned about ICANN, we learned the trinity of ICANN. There's the ICANN org, there's the ICANN community, there's the ICANN board. So what do you mean by ICANN? I mean, ICANN org, I guess they will certainly be like, yeah, probably none of our business. I don't know. I don't speak for them. But I think ICANN community and what we're the most proud of is our multi-stakeholder governance model. And I think the brilliance of it is we decide collectively, bottom up, on a consensus base, whether something should be an issue that we should be considering. So the society, I guess we all come from the society. So we are not saying we represent every voice of the society, but in ICANN, we can collectively, bring all the multi-stakeholder voice to decide whether, what technology is using. Is it within this very clearly delineated, very narrow scope of ICANN? And is it some issues that we're supposed to be considering? Is it within the scope of ICANN's mission? Is that something we as a community can be dealing with? I think that's a process we always follow. And following the process, we always achieve something, although sometimes it takes more years than, a month or so. But yeah, I mean, it's like a yes or no, yes and no answer, because yes, we can decide if we think it's within our scope. That is something we should deal with, and we will follow the process to deal with it. Or we can decide no as a community that, okay, this is out of scope. This is not something we can deal with. Or it's out of scope, but it's something we have to deal with. But then we have to initiate another process to kind of probably change the ICANN bylaw to include it in the ICANN mission. But that's something definitely, have to involve everybody in the community to make that decision.
Right. So I think one of the concern when we talk about blockchain and Web3 domain names and things like that, it needs to go back into a policy perspective as well. And especially when we, bring the conversation back to what we talked about before about critical infrastructure. For example, INTA, the International Trademark Association, in their own definition of DNS abuse, it does include blockchain domain names and blockchain technology as part of the definition of DNS abuse. Certainly, I don't want to bring up the whole definition again, but just from that perspective, I would like to see what's the panelist's opinion. Just let's assume that somehow we are able to satisfy a lot of the ICANN requirement using blockchain. Do you think the blockchain technology actually improve the concept of domain name being a critical infrastructure? I don't know whether my question makes sense, but this is open to all. Anyone want to kind of talk about how blockchain would impact critical infrastructure and domain names?
So I'll jump in on this, and just first, I think, just a caveat, I think that the INTA's definition of DNS abuse is a little too broad, because they basically would say anything deceptive, malicious, or illegal is DNS abuse, which is much different than the definition within ICANN. But that said, a lot of the things that happen with the blockchain or Web3 domains are things that that do need to be accounted for. You can't just have illegal activities going on your blockchain because that could be a big concern out there. Also trademark disputes. That was a very big early thing with ICANN, was how to resolve those issues. And so a handshake we were one of the first Web3 providers to actually allow for a UDRP for disputes there. So I think there can be some models and things there that follow on that, but not doing that could subject those operators to liability. So I think there's and maybe it may not necessarily follow what ICANN does, but there needs to be ways to accommodate that just to ensure that, the liability isn't on that provider itself.
Right. Anyone want to chime in?
Alvin, if I may, I think one of the things for us to look at is responsible and secure integration actually has a lot of meaning and a lot of weight to it. I've read of blockchain identifiers that have claimed in the past to automatically mirror whatever is going to happen in the domain name space, in the Web2 space, right? When I hear things like that, I really worry, because when you claim that the same behavior will be mimicked on two completely separate platforms, two sets of databases, etc. The reality of it is that entropy will happen, and there will be loss of fidelity in that kind of tracing of the same characteristics or behaviors between domain names and blockchain identifiers. So I think claims like that have to be subject to a very high audit bar, to a very high standard, and not just be accepted as is. The second thing that I think we ought to be thinking about is, where are the places where blockchain technologies can actually enhance and can do things in some ways better than what has been attempted and failed in the Web2 space. And there's so much space for experimentation and innovation there. I like some of the tokenization measures that are happening, but I wonder whether eventually the biggest opportunity is that domains become a central tool for verification for identifiers in the blockchain space. There's some work that is going on in that area, and I think that's an exciting area if it actually works.
Thank you, Ram. I think that's a good time for us to pivot into the next technology, AI. So one of the key values of domain naming that we discussed earlier is in search. And in any search engine, the website is ranked. So you need a domain name, basically. So AI could replace search and thus replace domain name. That would be the argument. Do you see this as a threat to the domain name industry and the value of domain name?
Well, I'll jump in here and I think the current AI that we're dealing with, generative AI or the large language models, are a bit overblown with what people think it can do. I recall not too distant past, people could go to Google and it would tell them how many rocks they should eat per day, or that they should use glue to keep cheese on pizza. So these are predictive text algorithms. They're not looking anything up, and it can be it's sometimes a deeply flawed and hallucinatory technology. So from that aspect, I don't think it's going to replace it. Perhaps there could be a way to enhance it, but I think having domain names and authoritative things where you can actually go through and do rankings, such as what Google and other search engines have done over time, is still going to be something of value.
All right. So, Ram, you want to comment?
Yeah, I think that AI is accelerating domain selection because it offers smart brand aligned name suggestions, which I think is a pretty significant advancement in how people pick names right now. I also think that AI-powered domain management tools are on their way to improve both security and efficiency, especially for companies that have multiple domains or a large domain name portfolio. I think AI is going to be quite a game changer. But I think that means, Alvin, for companies like Mark Monitor and CSC, you have to innovate because some of the work that you do is now automatable using AI. So there is some work that is necessary there. I think the biggest thing that AI is beginning to do, at least inside of our own company, what we're seeing is we're able to get better insights into user behavior and search trends that we didn't have before. And that is a factor that can boost engagement as well as visibility. So I think there are positive things in that area. Now, the other side of it, though, is I think we have to be mindful that AI tools today don't actually have great transparency. You don't actually know how they are generating the answers they're generating. And if you ask the tools to describe how they get there, they usually stumble or they often stumble. The other thing, in addition to what Owen is saying about hallucinations, is that data quality and bias matters. And bias training definitely skews the large language models and the outputs that come from it. And from a security perspective, we're finding that there is actually quite a lot of innovation happening by the bad actors in incorporating AI. We're seeing phishes that are really expertly done because AI engines are creating really good phishing attacks. Spear phishing is now becoming even better, and the micro targeting that is possible with AI is something to be concerned about. And I think from the threat side of things, one of the things I really worry about is with AI-based engines and generative-based engines, if you look at spam accounts or if you look at phish attempts, you can actually now have a single domain name that is throwaway directed just at you, Alvin, and another one just at you, Manju, and another one just at you, Owen. When before it used to be that a single domain name, did work for multiple people, but now you can micro target one to one. And that's an area I think we ought to be paying attention to.
Great. I'm glad it's not targeting Elena, though. So I think that's a great problem that we bring out about DNS with phishing attack and stuff like that. But one of the problem that AI brings out in terms of governance, internet governance, is actually mis and disinformation. Do you think domain name could play a role in identifying trustworthy versus untrustworthy information?
I guess I'll jump in. I'm a lawyer who works in compliance, so I'm just not going to trust anything with Elegant, but that's just me personally. But I think context certainly does matter. And even if it's a domain name, it could still be untrustworthy. We've seen a proliferation in the last 10 years or so of fake news or biased news out there. So I think just having it be in a domain name doesn't necessarily inherently make it trustworthy. And you should always take a critical look to pretty much anything you find online.
Yeah, but the thing is, in the context of AI, it kind of basically scan everything and then pull everything together. Certainly it doesn't work as amazing as people might think at the moment, but still, information are kind of mixed together sometimes. And that's the source of misinformation, because I'm a phisher. I can basically create some context, some content online that is misleading. If I create more about this, there's a possibility that I can trick the AI into believing that actually is the big is the best next word to display. Now, in that sense, I can actually create misinformation using this. So when we go back into the concept of domain being a critical infrastructure, and even Ram talked about something along the line of being a trust anchor or something like that. So I wonder whether that could be some sort of thing that we can do, or talk to the search engines and stuff like that, or the AI company to actually help with this. Let's just throw an example out, like .gov. Anything that come in a .gov is supposedly come from the US government at the very least. That kind of identify the source of information as well. So I don't want to jump to any conclusion, but I want to see what you think along this line. Is there anything that you see would be helpful?
I think you touched on something really important, Alban, which is that generative engines are now starting to hide domain names. It used to be with search engines, and it still is with search engines. You got search results, but along with the search results, you had the URL, you had the domain name associated with it. So if you looked at, why is there a black spot, on my foot? And you had, 5 answers that came back in a Google search. You could look at the one that, came from the URL. You could say, oh, this is coming from Harvard Medical Center. It's likely to be more trustworthy, and therefore you click on it and you get there, right? But I think with generative engines now, there is a synthesized answer that is brought to you, and some engines, ChatGPT, for example, does not actually provide you the source. Gemini, in many cases, does provide you the source, but ChatGPT doesn't. I think this is actually a long-term trend that is going to hit us really fast, and people are going to not assign value to the domain name that they do today, and they do it subconsciously today. Like you said, somebody looks at a .gov, or somebody looks at a .edu, or someone looks at a .co.au, and they think these are trustworthy, validated spaces. And that's going away. And I think that's actually a significant issue for the domain industry.
Yeah, thank you. Elena?
Yeah, thank you, Alvin. I will attempt an example just from the policy world again, and with the caveat that I'm not obviously here into the business of domain names. As I said before, I monitor the policy world, and I don't know the commercial part of it. But speaking to AI and trusted search results, that's, I think, what we're talking about here, right? My example here would be, if I am NASA, and I'm very, very concerned, which I know it's a real concern, about the deep fake photos that are proliferated around the internet. I spend a lot of money going to the moon and taking photos, and then those are my photos, and there are fakes about that. I guess that if I had my own top-level domain, .nasa, and I published everything that I took a photo from there, and somehow that was the trusted source for these kind of photos, that would add to being sure that whatever generative engine is taking it's crowdsourcing from me, it is a trusted source. Just attending an example there. Thank you.
Thank you. So in light of time, I just want to move on to talk about business opportunity that we see from this emerging technology. And I do want to leave maybe a couple of minutes for Q&A as well. So let me see. So let's talk about blockchain domain name first. This particular question, I'm thinking it would be quite interesting, because in the last year, the APAC DNS forum, we also have another crypto domain provider come on the stage and talk. And he actually talked about how the crypto domain are tied in with the crypto wallet, and certainly crypto wallet tie into the financials and all that. And it is actually used on a personal basis and linked to some social media login as well. So how do you see such usage may impact the domain name industry and the value of domain name?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think I must confess this isn't an area that I know as much about, more of the ICANN side of things, but I certainly think there's a lot of potential opportunities there, which could also then lead its way over into how Web 2 domains function. There may be more secure ways of transferring domain names in Web 3 that don't exist in Web 2, and perhaps that could have a way of influencing that. There are, always a whole bunch of things being innovated and created. So I think there's a lot of potential opportunities there that we may not even see now or currently being developed and haven't been made public yet. But I think there's a lot of excitement and good possibilities of things in the future.
All right. How about Mandrew? Do you have any opinion on that?
I guess as I'm personally not a domain registrant. I don't have the money to register a domain, but so NCSG, we represent the restaurants' voice. I think when we're talking about business opportunities and how do you, we hear a lot of during the past few days, how to integrate Web 3, Web 2, and then there's Web 4. It's important really when you're considering any kind of new products or any kind of new development of your business to take into account of the perspectives or like the challenges your domain registrants are gonna face. What issues do they care about? They care about their data privacy. Are you gonna just share your data, with the Web3 domain names if, they're connected or whatsoever? Or, is there a complaint mechanism when they want to contact you to discuss if there's a Web3 domain name that looks exactly like my Web2 domain names? Is there a complaint mechanism from both sides that a registrant can talk about? Is more domain names gonna be more restrictive on the domain name registrant's freedom of expression, or is it gonna be opening up more opportunities for registrants? I think these are all, points to be considered, but not very much talked about because when we're talking about business and industry, registrants' voice kind of are not as regarded as important. But so that's why I'm here, I guess. Thank you for inviting me. And that was my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess that's something as an industry we can also think about as well, because in the last session we have Meta talking about the universal acceptance. Sometimes it's all come into how users are using it, and there needs to be some drive for people and even individual or SMEs or large companies to do certain things. And one development is that if you look into website and domain name like 20 years ago, that you're probably going to see a lot more personal website. You don't see a lot of personal website now because Facebook is a lot easier to use. But if we are able to tie in more personalized use through Web3 domain names and how it linked into payment wallet and social media account, that is something that I don't think we have fully explored the potential. So I would certainly think that might be a business use case that we can talk about in the subsequent session and explore a bit further. So I'm just aware of time because we have 4.5 minutes left. I want to leave some time open for questions, if there's any. All right, no questions. Then I would like to use the rest of the time for some closing remarks from the panelists. Maybe I can go with Elena first, and then Ram and Owen and Mandrew.
Sure, thank you. Again, speaking to the policymaker policymakers' world, I would say two things for us to bear in mind. One, undoubtedly, domain names are considered essential, important, critical infrastructure, you name it, from that perspective. And one very important element that makes them essential, important, critical is obviously their uniqueness. So an important consideration for whatever comes next, virtual worlds, Web 4, Web 6, who knows what this is preservation of that uniqueness. And that brings me to the second thing to bear in mind from the policy makers world, that considerations around how to preserve this uniqueness are already happening in their sphere, reflecting and recognizing the value of the domain names as identifiers, and with the will to maintain them going forward with whatever, as I said again, comes next. Thanks.
Ram?
Thank you, Alvin, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. It's been interesting to speak about these emerging issues that are happening in the domain space. Look, from my point of view, domains empower real choice and control. They have in the past, and they are poised to continue doing that, because domain names are more than just a web address. They are still essential tools to create trust, to stand out in a crowded market, and to foster a more empowered and independent online ecosystem. In the future, it's not a question if everyone will have a digital identity, Alvin. It's a universal digital identity, I think, is going to be key for brands to build a user base and stay competitive, no matter what business they establish today or years from now. And the interesting side piece of it is that we are now in a creator economy, and creator economy requires digital identity.
Thank you.
Just in the interest of time, I'd say I agree with a lot with what Ram just said, and I also think that we really are seeing now where existing technology domains and emerging technologies are really starting to merge together and coordinate a lot better. And I think there's a lot of potential moving forward, which is we didn't see that several years ago. So I think there's a maturation for the new emerging technologies, and I look forward to how everything can continue to function and move together and integrate in the future.
So I guess I don't know why you make me the last person to talk about to make the closing remark. But I guess going back to our title actually of this forum, we're trying to achieve an inclusive internet to connect people, empowering our future. So I think we're using domain names as one of our weapons or one of our tools to achieve this and as our means, right? And like everybody has already mentioned, domain is going to stay valuable and stay as an important tools for the open, interoperable internet. Just how we're going to be more inclusive, we're talking about emerging technology and how we can work together, to connect people and empower our future, I guess. I really hate you for putting me the last person to the closing remarks. But yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. We are right on time exactly now. So thank you very much for participating in this session. I suppose we are to take a picture together, right?
Yes, now thank our moderator and speakers for your insightful discussion. And now we will take a photo. Okay, now Mr. Ram, Mohan, and Miss Elena, please stay as well. We're gonna have a photo together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and now it is time for a short tea break. And the next section will be back in this room at 2:45 p.m. See you then, and thank you, everyone.